So on a different subject, what we were going to kind of do here, and Ray, if you have any other questions as we're doing this, please feel free to chime in and talk. But I'd like to switch subjects to time and kind of how time actually plays into some of these pieces. It's kind of interesting, even how we were talking right there, a statement being just a snapshot in time. Did you know that a balance sheet is technically just a snapshot in time? Your income statement says, hey, I have a range. I have a start and I have an end where I'm going to be pulling all your sales and all your expenses and all your different things from. But your balance sheet is technically a literal snapshot in time, just like a statement is a snapshot in time for your customers and the invoices that they have. So Shannon, I'm going to turn it over to you just to kind of get us, I'm looking to kind of change the subject a little bit. Over lunch, we were talking a little bit about time and such, and I'd kind of like you just to like either recap or say something that was interesting, and we'll kind of run from there.
Well, I brought up just a question from the notebooks that I have been recording, and I just asked about a particular customer and the project they had been working on. And Brandon started telling me some history that essentially as they started working on this project, he began to realize, and he even used the description at one point in my mind was filleted open, to basically how time is an aspect of everything and one of the greatest underlying factors essentially of all the aspects that go on in Adilas. So elements of time is such a huge portion of what is done.
Correct. And so we actually created a thing called Elements of Time, but if you actually looked at it, if you pick anything in here, everything actually has a date and a time to it that happens. A reimbursement, when did this happen? Who do I owe? How long did it take me to pay them back? Payroll, oh, it goes from this date to this date. And so what ends up happening is instead of worrying about the exact minutes, it may even be up to the date range type thing, but every single thing ends up having your customers, the reason you're sending them a statement is they've purchased things and you want to collect on that, okay? So you're basically saying lots of things have happened, I need to create a statement to collect this money, and then because I want to deposit it because I need it to come in and hit my financials, okay? So it's very interesting, and I thought it was, Shannon nailed it on the head when she said time is an underlying aspect. So when we originally drew this particular map and kind of brainstorming on where the pieces would go, time was actually not even included in here at all. And there's a bunch of the pieces of time that were not included. Once we kind of decided that time needed to be added, we actually added a number of other features. Objects and data over time. This is the heart. Like if you say what's the heart of Adilas, it's right here. Users and objects and data over time. Okay? If you look right along the same line with this just general concepts right here, you have another time-based element. Your AR waiting room, your accounts receivable, who owes you money, and where's it been at? On the opposite side of that, AP, vendor waiting room. Who do you owe? What are your payables? What are that kind of stuff? And so it's kind of interesting how time ends up playing into some of these different little pieces. History, what happens over time? What shows up? What did I do? What did I add? What did I do? All this kind of stuff. So elements of time is a physical piece of the puzzle inside of Adilas, but basically what we do is everything runs and kind of processes on that type of a mode. Shannon, did you have any other questions, or like I'm kind of just lightly going in a time-based thing right now, but would you like to see how some of that works, or
Sure,
would you like me to?
I've never seen anything in the elements of time section. Well,
okay.
Everything relates to time, but I've never clicked on that button.
Okay, sure. So elements of time will take me to my elements of time homepage. And so by default, I can show it as a calendar. I can show it as a lot of different pieces and things, okay?
Just kidding, I have seen that.
And so, just kidding, I have seen that. What I wanted to show you right here really quick is elements of time. We've talked briefly about some of the different pieces, and this is just a portion of it. What ended up happening is as we were brainstorming, we found that more and more things are associated under time. And so Ray, if you're still there, even like bringing inventory into your system, it ends up becoming time sensitive, date sensitive. When did I get it? When did I pay for it? How did I pay for it? What happened? And so what ends up happening is this time ends up being kind of like this story. I'm going to switch to a different corporation really quick, and I'm going to actually just bring up a small little graphic that kind of has a bunch of little different pieces under it. So this is actually the physical Adilas Elements of Time calendar and some of the different pieces that we have. Hey, we're going to work with Adam's bookstore. Hey, we're going to go to Jane Medical and kind of help them out. And we're going to do this and this and this. What I wanted to do is I'm actually going to pull up a special little gallery that I have that I built for the class. And then what I'm going to do is, this is kind of a handy feature in case you wanted to know how to get an extra window open. I'm going to come up here, I'm on my home link. Instead of a regular click, I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to say open in a new window. Now basically what this does is it basically creates a new window for me to now navigate. I now have two different windows that I can switch between. I have this one and I have this one, and I told it to go to my home page. I actually have the My Favorites as my home page under Adilas. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is, now that I have two different pieces, I can switch between these particular things. What I wanted to show you on time is two different little pieces. One is a brick wall. A brick wall is a great analogy for time. Say you had the first of the month, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. Well, each little block, you could technically start adding in as many pieces you wanted. I had inventory coming in. I made some payments. I did some of this. I sold some stuff, but I put it on account, so that might run for a little bit before I actually establish it. But if you can think of a brick wall and how many bricks there are, that's what we actually do inside of Adilas. We virtually start sticking stuff into containers. It's all organized according to dates and times, and then we're able to virtually display that story back out to you. So I just wanted to kind of show you a couple of these things. The reason I opened up another window is because technically this particular photo gallery is under my Adilas Corporation. However, for my demos, I want it to be in the playground. And so I'm going to leave this one open as is. I'm going to switch windows. And now I'm actually going to switch back to the different corporation that I really want to work in. It's kind of a quick way to trick the system into thinking, hey, I just needed to go grab something from somewhere else. But at any point in time, I'm now on this one. If I click home and say I clicked on history and reports, this will tell me what I did today for the testing playground. But if I click back on this other window, it's under Adilas. Now if I tried to browse anything right here, because I physically switched, it would switch to the playground as well. But if I just wanted it static and just sitting there, I can leave it sitting because I'm not interacting with it. But right now the server knows that I'm currently connected to this corporation. So just really quick on a corporation level, I'm going to click home. This is what we kind of call your corporation. What is happening? And as you need additional locations, you basically take the same model and you start stacking it on top of each other. Imagine almost like a high-rise building with multiple different layers. If you have just a mom and pop shop, you have one. If you have multiples, you have multiple pieces. Right here, I'm just going to show you a small little graphic that kind of denotes that. I'm basically going to go right here to the main Adilas homepage, and I'm going to scroll down, and I know I have one that basically says each corporation is its own fenced-in entity, and then each location, so basically your whole corporation is here. What happens in Adilas is if you have multiple locations, you end up just basically stacking all of these features, and then you're virtually able to start sharing. So it almost becomes a one-to-many relationship between some of your corporations and locations. So what I was just trying to do is just kind of show you some stuff. The only reason I did that is that basically I needed some photo galleries in a different corporation, and I just thought of pulling that up. So Shannon, I'm going to kind of turn it back to you. I'm going to actually close this particular little graphic. We're right in here. Why don't you tell me something that you would like to know about time or dates and how it plays into some of these different features? Because basically what I'd like to do is just talk about how, and the reason time is here kind of towards the bottom is it's one of the base structures of this whole thing. And we needed to get it close to customers. But why don't you ask me something, and we're just going to briefly talk about time. And this might sound like kind of a random tangent, but if you understand that we literally are going in and blocking things in, even this right here, view today, yesterday, tomorrow, this week, last week, guess what that's basically saying? What happened in time? Okay, so from 3:24 to 3:30, let me report. One, I could say, do you want to physically see everything that I touched? If I click on this little drill down right here, okay, so far in this particular company, this week, here's what we've had. Boom, 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 boom. There's been a bunch of different things that have been added and done, and you can see that I've been using it tons and tons and tons. This tells me what's actually happening, okay? Recipes that we did, product things that we did, flex grids that we add, paycheck stubs that we ran, time cards that we did, etc., etc. Like, these are all different histories of different pieces that we do. If I click on it, it will actually tell me exactly what happened. Created, added a new line item for this much. It actually tells me which piece and which piece. So here's the dates and the times. Everything is time related. Okay? I added a new line item for $50.10. I added a new line item for $1,000. Each one is related to different little pieces of the puzzle. Sam's Club, the Midwife's Club, Amber Moore, we were actually creating a quick little thing right here for some paycheck stubs. At any point in time, if I needed to see a detail, I could click into that and go into that deeper to actually see what's actually playing into that feature. I'm going to click back a couple times, and we're going to go right back to the history homepage where we pulled it for the thing. This is very important because as I play in Adilas, it automatically pulls in these pieces and says, oh, in this date range, here's some of the pieces that actually got stuck into a single little hole in that brick. So if this is a week, or say this is a week, it's giving me a report, everything I shoved into those different little containers, okay? So as we come down, I had a bunch of different little things. We added some sub dates and times. At one point, this was actually dealing with laying out a pattern. Somebody was doing a sewing project, okay? So lots of different little things like that. Deposits, we've done 4 of them for $5.92. Here's the different line items, including this little guy right here that says, hey, what's this negative 39 cents? This is under a revenue adjustment. So if you clicked on it, it would technically say, oh, that was a credit card fee. We ran a deposit and we had a little credit card fee. Like, as soon as you start playing, we do this thing that we call roll call, which is basically like a server kind of saying, who fits in this criteria? And so what we do is it basically comes back, and then you're able to start doing it. We've done tons of stuff in invoices, lots of different things, different scans. We've done 8 counter sales, 5 client invoices. Here's a ton of different little pieces. We've used part number other 9 times. We've used verbiage 1 time. It's got tons and tons. So on my taxes, I've currently created $13.32 worth of taxes that I need to then remit back to the state. Statements, we've created 3 statements, quotes, POs. Like, basically what I wanted to show you is that every single thing that you do ends up being reported back to the system according to a date and time. So that's why it's very important that some of these pieces actually play into the puzzle. 1 customer log, 2 photos and scans for my stuff. Oh, sweet. I love hot tamales. So anyway, that kind of, it's important. Like, I know I'm kind of possibly overkilling it a little bit, but technically time, and not just elements of time, but time runs through every piece of this puzzle, and it's huge. So this is kind of almost on a preachy type level, but basically, if you go to church, often you're told that you're able to do different things, and eventually when you are called up to God, you'll have to do what's called return and report, okay? So basically, hey, what happened here? What did you do here? This type of stuff. We call it judgment, okay? Eventually it's called judgment. So guess what we actually do in a virtual world? Because we're creating this whole little world of Adilas, we give objects, say a customer, say an invoice, and we say, I'm going to start you, and we're going to let you start running over time, and then at any point in time, I want to be able to have you report what state or status you are in. I'm going to switch to a different picture. And I know that this might kind of feel like a gospel preaching right now. Oh no, I forgot I switched switched corporations. Oh man, watch this. No problem, piece of cake. So I was trying to be in the. See how it switched me to the use for testing? I violated my own little play record real quick. No problem. All I have to do is I actually have to just switch the corporation so I can get back to the piece that I needed. And then I'll basically say, here's the class, here's the photo gallery that I wanted. This is the piece that I wanted. I won't click off of it now. And now I'll come back here and I'll say, hey, you know what? Let's make sure that we're back because it's currently saying I'm in Adilas. I want to be in the playground. Back in the playground. Okay. So what I was going to try to do is actually just show you one small little thing. I wanted it a little bit bigger. What this particular picture does is it basically says this is the start right here of your life cycle. And then as it goes through it, we have different checkpoints that happen. These little boxes that are on the outside, what these little boxes are a representation of is permissions. So if you have just a basic permission and you're going to start one of these little objects and run it over time, you might only be able to take it to the first step or two. Then depending on your permissions, you can run it to the next little steps. As it completes its life cycle, we then basically map back virtually to any point in time. So that's why we call it running objects and data over time. Okay? So I'm going to just click here. This is once again just kind of theory, but what is very important is that you know what's actually happening. This is kind of just showing like the inside of a database, somebody sticking pieces into the different containers. Pretend each corporation has a different row that it gets to play on. Say this little box is invoices, this little box is quotes, this little box is deposits, this little box is this. In order to store it, where literally as soon as you do something, it's almost like a little person sticking these little pieces into the database, okay? And then when you pull it back out, we give you a nice looking little thing that has everything all pulled together. Okay? Here's another time analogy that might make sense to you. Water, its conversion process into ice, it starts very liquidy and then eventually becomes crystals and then forms into ice, but that takes time. It never just instantly happens, okay? That's time, that's time. There's a ton of different little pieces. I'm going to come down here. I think that I have some other little pieces. Often you'll have something that comes in, and then maybe it sits for a while, and then eventually something gets pushed out. This might be money. So, for instance, we are talking statements, okay? A customer comes in, buys something, and they walk out the door, but what happened to your money? You technically sold some stuff, so you lost some pieces, but then they owe you, and so they're going to sit on it, and eventually they're going to pay you, okay? So often time does a lot of different things. Input and output. This is like a little river moving down through stuff. This is the roll call, just kind of like, this would be the server, and this is a flags, and this is the data, the little teeny pieces that are way out there. Basically, the server would say, hey, I want everything to show up between this date and this date. Me. Okay? They basically pop in and say, hey, I'm playing. The server could then basically say, okay, I'm looking for just anybody with this flag. So if he changes his flags, all the hands would go down and all the data that's sitting out there would then pop back up and kind of say, hey, I'm doing this type of thing. Okay? It's basically flagged, time-sensitive data that's kind of important. These particular drawings, this was actually done way back in '09. Just kind of some of the concepts of like, where do we want to take this? This was literally some just little scratch paper, just kind of having fun. But we just thought it'd be kind of fun to pull it out of the vault and kind of show you like some of these little theories, if you will. Okay, I think I've probably done enough on my soapbox on time, but like it literally runs through everything. And we call it roll call accounting. And so it's a totally different model than a traditional accounting model. And we haven't even talked about it. Everything we've talked in this entire training class has been operations flow, operations flow. Well, guess what? We can't even do accounting and financials unless we have operations leading the way. It's very important. If you try to jump right to your financials, you literally are putting the cart in front of the horse and it will fall apart on you. So that's just kind of some general me speaking my mind type thing. The interesting thing is we actually didn't start trying to say, hey, cool, let's create a new financial type tracking system. Guess where we started? Inventory. I'm going to take a marker and I'm actually going to walk you through time, okay? We're going to just kind of pretend for a second, and we're going to kind of just start as far as like what happened first. The very first thing that we needed, this is for a trailer dealership and a used car dealership. We started here. I need to be able to track these big ticket items. These things are worth $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a piece, and we have salespeople who are trying to sell them, and basically there's no way to track who has what's owed on it. So we started here. Basically at this point, after we started there, eventually we kind of said, hey, you know what? We're going to need some people, some salespeople to actually be tied to stock units, okay? And then we were able to kind of say, hey, sorry, you can't have that one. It's already sold, or it's already committed to so-and-so. We started getting some basic numbers. At that point, some small little reports started being formed up. What were my sales? Who was on that deal? All this kind of stuff. It ended up feeding into like a light payroll. I'll just put this partially on because it was just kind of these history reports were turning into payroll and commissions. No invoices were actually created originally. The next piece of the puzzle that was pretty big was, oh my goodness, what about all of our parts that we have to have? We have a whole nother department with trailer parts and wiper blades and shocks and tires and wheels. So we added this general inventory piece, okay? We still needed users. As soon as we did general inventory, it kind of exploded at this point. We said, oh my goodness, we're going to need invoices, we're going to need quotes, we're going to need POs, we're going to need vendors, we're going to need customers, okay? There was no shopping cart at all, okay? But basically, in order to get general inventory, we basically went from itsy-bitsy teeny little inventory tracking on single units. As soon as we started pulling in parts, all of a sudden it was amazing. We basically had to say POs, vendors. We also need invoices, quotes, customers. Like we started being able to tie all of these different pieces together, okay? So the next little piece that actually came on board after this, and I'm kind of searching way back in the memory here because it's it's literally been a long time, is the next piece we had is millions of dollars in floor plan stuff. So floor plan were connected to these stock units. We would buy an item, say we had a new trailer and it was a $15,000 trailer. Well, what happens is the company had to use a floor plan in order to fund these type of deals. Well, as soon as we get into floor plan, guess what? We needed more history and reports to kind of figure out what's the difference between these. How's this going? Am I paying it off? Virtually, we're doing this kind of stuff, but not to that level, if that makes sense. Okay? Most of our accounts receivable was completely hidden. We didn't even have this piece of a portion. It was lightly there because we had invoices, but it really didn't exist. Okay? So we're starting, this is where we're starting on all of our pieces. After we got the floor plan done, the next piece of the puzzle was this. If I'm doing deposits, so invoices and customers, wouldn't it be nice if I could actually, the payments that I got, if I could actually deposit them? Wouldn't that be cool? And so that's where we wanted to go next. And so we basically said, okay, let's just kind of do a deposit. Well, guess what that brings on? Okay, going to need a bank in order to do a deposit, okay? I'm also going to need to be able to track what is actually kind of temporarily not fully deposited yet. So invoice payments that are coming in that need to eventually be deposited. So we're like, okay, cool. Well, heck, if we're doing banks and we have deposits, and guess what? It would be really cool if we come back. So we circle back around to payroll. Time cards actually came in there way towards the beginning as well. I'll just kind of click it in as payroll. But basically, as soon as we started saying, hey, if we want to do deposits and we need banks, let's put the other piece to that, okay? So we said, let's add expenses. Awesome, cool. Whoa, guess what this opens up? We can now track what we actually owed on these incoming POs and potentially even start paying them. And so you start getting into accounts payable, and you start getting into payments on account for all these POs or these stock units that were owed, or even for floor plan that was owed. Say you had millions of dollars that was owed here. Well, you'd want to track that, so it actually ends up going through, eventually through a vendor, through an expense, through a bank, if that makes sense, okay? So basically you can kind of slowly start seeing how some of these pieces are added. As we start adding that, we're like, oh my goodness, we have a whole bunch of these pieces of the puzzle right now. Location actually was a base-based setup. We actually, when we started, we had 5 locations, okay, in Colorado. By the time we were done getting even just to this level, we had 17 locations. So blah, 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 tons. So all of a sudden, we were starting to do all of these features and processes again and again and again and again and again. And then basically what happened is at a certain point in time, is basically Steve said, oh my goodness, why don't we just do this for this and this and this and this? And he kind of started catching the vision. Wow, all we're missing is just a little report here that actually pulls data from this. And this little guy right here, we could just temporarily do something there to kind of pull in the pieces that we're missing that we don't already have. And so all in all, the whole system just kind of slowly started being built up. And so instead of starting at this financial level, which is very, very common, we started here. I need to track a unit, okay? And then what ends up happening is the further we get along, we're like, oh my goodness, look at how everything is dealing with time. We're going to need some scheduling. We're going to need some quick searching. We're going to need ways to tie all of these pieces together. We're going to need all of this kind of stuff. And so that's basically, in a nutshell, just a small little review